I wanted to address an argument I've been seeing on the right lately when it comes to overall gender slop discourse. I'm a casual fan of Dave Green, and he wrote out a tweet that I think highlights the overall tactical mistake I am seeing. Like all my other videos, nothing personal, just some constructive criticism that I think will make the right a little bit more effective. So I have two main problems with the logic of this tweet, where I think its author makes some tactical mistakes. The bottom line up front is that whether it's true or not, it's more politically effective to operate as though women are the enemy. And the overall assumption I am making is that the only way the current issues get solved is by politically organizing enough young men. First off, I take issue with the, quote, "it divides our allies, it empowers our enemies." I wholeheartedly disagree with this take. If the past 2 decades have proven anything, it's that leaning into gender slop culture war issues generates momentum for change. The best example we have recently seen where people organized against an entrenched regime is Gamergate. It created a subculture that, although is different today, does have some political organizing and has a form of elite class. Gamergate ultimately failed for its own reasons, but I don't think you would argue that it failed because it was too divisive towards women, right? Are you saying that if Gamergate was a little more accommodating towards the enemy, it would have overthrown the female gaze and reasserted the male gaze in culture? We can also look towards how Trump handled his campaign. Calling Rosie O'Donnell disgusting. Megyn Kelly had blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her whatever. Grab them by the pussy. Kamala Harris is a fat bitch. The debate moderators being women that Trump could banter with. Again, I want to ask you whether you think these things helped or hurt Trump. If you look at the exit polling, it's having a higher or a more even ratio of men to women voting Republican signal a Republican victory. Because it appears to me that while there is definitely an effort to hide people recognizing the pattern, that when men, particularly younger men, are closer to 50-50 ratio of Republican votes, Republicans lose. But when men, particularly younger men, are closer to 54 or better yet 55% of Republican votes, Republicans win. I think that if men organize as a political bloc in a relatively similar way that women organize in a political bloc, that would lead to stronger Republican victories. And I think that one way you do that is by, as Sargon of Akkad puts it, quote, scaring the hoes. Because that rallies men to the flag. Now, before I get to the second problem I have with the post, I want to preemptively address the hashtag not all women argument I'm sure some boomer cons will try to raise. Some women are based, they'll say. We don't want to push out people who are inclined to be allies, they'll say. They obviously think this is true, but based women will follow and you don't need to worry about scaring them. Yes, there were a lot of heroic women in the Gamergate movement. Yes, there are a lot of female Trump supporters that are useful allies. But for the sake of this argument, I feel like it would be helpful to broadly categorize women into two different groups. My argument is that the based women aren't going to care about idiots online saying, repeal the 19th. The women that are going to care about this are the so-called right-wing girl bosses. The Tommy Laurens of the world, the Allie Beth Stuckeys, the Liz Willers, the Barry Weisses. But turning off these women is a feature, not a bug, because these types of women are historically not good allies. They want to occupy a space as far left of a position on the right wing as possible. And even if you cuck on this issue and moderate your language so that these types are comfortable, in the future, something will inevitably trigger them, and they will ultimately countersignal the real revolutionary right with a I denounce the dissident right media tour. You think you want these women on side, but trust me that you really don't. To me, by trying to cater to the Tommy Lauren types, it sounds like your side of the argument is doing the, quote, quitty please mommy that you denounce in your post. But of course, there is another type of woman you can cater to. You think the Ann Coulters, the Megyn Kellys, the shoe on heads are going to care about idiots online saying repeal the 19th?
Heading out.
No, I would expect that they're going to find it funny, or they're going to be smart enough to understand the underlying points being made behind the slogan. Or they're going to be like, okay, cool, I don't want to get involved into politics because it's getting like dirty and dangerous and whatever. As more evidence, I want to point out that this is not even exclusively right-wing phenomena. I'm old enough to remember the Hillary versus Sanders schism of 2016 and the Warren versus Sanders schism of 2020. What was the general consensus around these two campaigns? That there was a culture of something called the, quote, Bernie Bros. And you could see all these voids on MSNBC whining about how the Sanders campaign was sexist. It had all this energy. And they kept worrying about how all these young women were gravitating towards Sanders and against Clinton or Warren, because all the young guys were in the Sanders camp. Part of what gives political organizing energy is notating an in-group and an out-group. If the goal is to politically organize young men, sharply signaling against women is useful. It energizes demoralized men and empowers them against the out-group. It gives the in-group status over the out-group. It is an especially powerful tool at this moment when a ton of Zoomers can plainly see real issues in the current gender dynamic. And not just for organizing or grabbing power, but also because giving these Zoomer men a certain level of status and prestige over their counterparts in these political settings is what is ultimately going to heal the gender divide. These women want men who have higher status than them. And again, this is what you saw in the Bernie versus Warren subcultures. The non-girl boss types generally move towards the direction of Bernie because that is where the young, attractive guys with power were. Sure, you can say a certain phenomenon went in the other direction as well. There was a certain type of guy who saw a ton of young, attractive women with power in the Warren camp and moved there to try to get laid. But the trend was generally in one direction, as the media noted. And both the men and women that were in the Bernie camp were more the type of people that are politically useful to you than the men and women that were in the Warren camp, the girl bosses and the simps. Now let's address the second point I take issue with. I want to ask you a serious question. Did Democrats get farther with their criminal justice reforms in the 60s through the 2000s, or when they pivoted to saying, quote, abolish the police? Did they make more progress when they had a simple slogan, or when they had some esoteric explanation on precisely the types of reforms they wanted to see in policing the more urban areas of our society? That's why I would argue just say repeal the 19th. It's cleaner. You need to understand your position as a revolutionary is fundamentally different than someone who is trying to maintain the status quo. Again, look at Trump and his outrageous comments about women. Step 1, scare the hoes. Step 2, you get a reaction and force all the entrenched power to respond to the outrage, covering topics and issues they normally want to ignore. Step 3, you mock the people getting triggered, use their platform to cover the issues, and spread your message. Step 4, profit. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my argument. Peace.